Let's go now. A little life out here. What the hell's going on out here? Hey, what about that now?
Hello everybody, welcome to the UK Packers podcast. As usual, I'm your host at SteeDDNFL on Twitter, and of course follow the group at UK Packers. Is our season over? That's the question. The answer is no. Well, maybe, but not for the reason that you think. Micah Parsons is out, ACL injury. One of the non-contact injuries just looks really bad. And unfortunately it was confirmed that it was an ACL injury. And the discourse online and from pundits and fans alike are saying that our season is now over because of this, that our only chance to get defensive pressure or to put a good defensive performance together is to have Micah Parsons in there. What I do agree with is that Micah Parsons is a game changer and getting a load of pressure, but I'm not as down on the season just because Micah Parsons is out, and that's for a number of different reasons. The main one being that we were getting spanked in this game defensively, even with Micah Parsons on the field. As much as Micah Parsons is a loss, and he is a loss, and I'm not downplaying it in that way, as much as he is a loss up front, the biggest deficiency in this team, and it was laid bare last night, is our secondary. There was, I think, 5 chances at getting interceptions. Valentine dropped one, obvious one. Lucas Van Ness could have come down with a strip fumble, and Xavier McKinney missed 3. One of them I understand because it was on 3rd down. They went for it on 4th down, ended up converting that 4th down. So he batted down that 3rd down, which is a wise decision. If you try catch it and you bobble it, fumble it, and the receiver gets it, I get all of that. However, to lay the stats out and the facts as they are, and interceptions typically are not the Keyshawn Nixon style, and I'll get around to Keyshawn Nixon too. They're not the Keyshawn Nixon, lob the ball directly into the breadbasket kind of stuff. They are difficult to come down with, as are some passes from your quarterback, and they were dropped too. There was subpar performances by an awful lot of people last night. To start off, I guess, with the positive, Jordan Love, for the majority of the game, and there was one stage where the comms called out the stats that he'd completed 80% of his passes, and you can't argue with that. Which brings me to the Watson news and all that, but sticking to good performances, I think Josh Jacobs played out of his skin. Remember, this was a guy who's on a snap count, and he came down with a pass in the tightest of coverages for only his 2nd pass touchdown of his whole career, and also his longest run of the season. So what a game to come down with both of those things. He was super duper valuable. And again, it's brought out the boo birds, right? I see this whole Matt LaFraud thing being bantied around. At the end of the day, the Packers put up enough points to win this game, and I think the game was lost on a number of different things. The offense don't get away with it. I mean, there was... But that said, there was their 5 consecutive drives to start the game where they got into the red zone. They scored 1 touchdown and the rest were field goals, so I understand that. But when you look behind it all, the reasoning for that, in my mind, is the fact that Rashid Walker could not stop committing penalties. And I can hear the counter narrative already. If you're on 1st and 15, you should be able to overcome that with certain plays. But on the night, the Packers were not. And you get some momentum, you get down the field, you commit a penalty at the worst time. And to add to the whole penalty thing, there was unnecessary roughness. There was, Enigbare, offside for 1. And then the unnecessary roughness on the punter, of all people. Just absolute boneheaded stuff. Not to mention missed tackles. There was passes that went in and they scored touchdowns on when we had these guys in triple coverage. It was Quay Walker and Keyshawn Nixon and Carrington Valentine. It seemed like a game where there was even an occasion, and it's insult to injury at this stage of the game because it didn't go anywhere. And in fact, the Broncos made a real weird decision to go for it on 4th down, which gave the Packers another snap at it, and it just didn't work because they pinned their ears back and got after Jordan Love and sacked him. But there was an occasion, I believe it was maybe 3rd down, but Colby Wooden had Nix dead to rights, and Nix just literally ducked underneath his arms. The tackling was shocking. And to go back to the Parsons element of it, he was still getting the ball out, and he was still getting the ball out to players that were wide open or should have been covered or were in double, triple coverage. The ball should never have been thrown. And they came down with it. There's other occasions where it was back-to-back quirky plays. One where it looked like Bo Nix was actually running out of bounds or going to throw it out of bounds and connected with the pass, and boom, first down. So I think it was just a poor performance by the defense lost this game. And I see that because I've had an extra day, because usually I get on straight after, so I've been sort of having a poke around and seeing what people are saying. And I think the lazy narrative out there is that the minute Parsons went out, it took them 2 plays to score a touchdown. And I got to disprove how that, in my mind, is a load of nonsense, because on those next 2 plays, we had 2 free rushers at the quarterback and had a chance to make a play, put massive pressure on Bo Nix, and he still completed passes because our secondary were hopeless. So I don't think that's a Micah Parsons issue. And if anything, what might end up happening is that instead of game planning and double teaming Parsons, you get opportunities elsewhere on the field, because like the commentary said about Josh Jacobs, he doesn't catch passing touchdowns. That was the second one of his entire career last night. So when you have him, get one-on-one on Josh Jacobs to the end zone. Of course, no-brainer. And he's the one who comes down with a Randy Moss-style catch to beat all odds. Now, I'm not saying that's the solution, but it just goes to show when you don't have the game plan for somebody, you will leave someone else open, right? And it can go both ways. You're zapping up 2 offensive linemen or a tight end or a running back to try chip Micah Parsons and keep him at bay, or you design runs literally wherever he isn't. That's where your bootleg is going to be. And they don't have to do that now. But, and then the sort of theory is as well, they're going to drop back and throw more, maybe. And this is the reason why the Packers weren't coming down with interceptions this season. But we had ample opportunity. 5 is what I counted. And we couldn't come down with any of them. And in fact, the only time we got a turnover was when Micah Parsons was on the field for the first Broncos offensive drive and pulled our player, I believe it was Harvey, to the ground, and Nedrin Cooper scooped it up. Scoopy Coopy. But again, there's all a masterful technique by Parsons to get the ball out. He was just bringing the guy to ground. These things can be over-egged as well. So look, the loss of Micah Parsons is a loss. Is that the reason why we're going to not top the NFC North, or not make it to the playoffs, or not make it to the Super Bowl? I'm not so sure. I mean, before the season, Jeff Hafley would have had to game plan. And like I've discussed, I mean, these defensive and offensive game plans are put in place in the February, March, maybe April, earlier in the year, and they're solidified. They're literally put to the printer or on the players' iPads or whatever, but they do have the playbook printed out and nicely bound. Not that they can't change it, but that's how the NFL works. And then they trade for Parsons in this blockbuster signing. And then Hafley has to rejig his defensive playbook, and you design an awful lot of stuff around Parsons, and he affords you the opportunity. The concern is that with Parsons out on the field, we didn't have, and I know Rashan Gary stepped up, but he's sort of regress is not the right reason, because there's loads of different nuance to it. But we haven't had someone come in and just be an absolute slam dunk, hassling, getting sacks. Although Rashan Gary looks really busy, and sometimes I would proffer a disruption or quarterback pressure is just as good as a sack. If he's going to throw the ball away, or he's going to, you force him into a silly decision, great. But what's tending to happen is, and I do apologise, because guess who's got a sinus infection again? Me. Who has 2 thumbs and has a sinus infection? Me. It's just not coming off for the Packers. We force the throw, but they complete the bloody thing, right? Which is not a good thing. The game summary for me comes down to this. The first 2 offensive drives, both ended in field goals, both scuppered by Walker penalties. The defense gave up a touchdown by allowing Nix to escape, and then on 1st and 20, they commit a penalty. It was a Bullard penalty, and then that ends up being a first down, then there's 3 third downs, and they convert them all. And then on the second defensive possession, it's just chunk yardage, which has to be laid at the feet of Nixon, and then a touchdown, which happens between 3 defenders. And then it all really unravels in this game for me, because the Packers, again, are not out of it. Again, this is another game where the Packers have not been blown out of it, and this is the number 1 team in the AFC. But it all unravels for me in the 7th defensive stand. There's 2 missed interceptions, both by Xavier McKinney. Parsons get injured. On that play that he gets injured, there's just a manky missed tackle. Then it's a shot to the end zone. Just brutal. So they're going to have to go back to the original game plan. Now, that would be okay. And this was a defense that was tipped for greatness, remember, before Parsons even got here. And the Parsons trade was the one that tipped us over the edge, apparently. But with Devontae Wyatt out and us not having that capability and that big body in there to stop the run, it is, of course, very concerning. Now, we have Lucas Van Ness back. And he did get busy later on in the game. But again, we're getting to the red zone. We're not scoring touchdowns. Penalties are killing us there. Also a good defensive play. I mean, on the second offensive drive, the ball was going to Dobbs, and it was an outstanding throw, an outstanding route by Dobbs, and it was just a great defensive play, because that happens as well, believe it or not. And again, like I said, the Packers defense had huge opportunities to get interceptions. McKinney, on my count, had 3. Van Ness had 1. Valentine had 1. And in the end, guess what happens? Wicks spills the ball and coughs it up. And that's not the only sort of bad thing I have against Wicks's name in this game. There's one end around that looks like it's, got good potential, but Wicks just whiffs on the poxy tackle and allows it to be stuffed for no gain. And again, the Packers were leading by 1, and we let the Broncos convert on 4th down. It's just sort of criminal stuff, and then we were able to run stuff it later on. The secondary shown, it's not good enough. Nixon and Valentine in particular were liabilities in this game. Xavier McKinney is around the ball but couldn't come down with it. Zach Tom going out is impactful, but we believe we've missed sort of dodged the bullet here, where it's not expected to be a serious injury, that he's going to be back sooner rather than later. Watson injury, also very impactful, but he seems to have avoided the serious injury. And again, I see the discourse saying that, why put Watson in these positions? I think it was the last podcast I said this is going to happen to Watson at some stage in this season. And I said I touch wood, but there's a large percentage possibility that he's going to come down with an injury, because this is what happens when you have a Rolls Royce, a Ferrari style player. You send them down the field and you make that shot on 1v1s. Now, I know it's their best defensive player and, defensive player of the year, whatever he was, versus our best offensive player who stretches the field. I believe you take that shot and take that matchup, because Watson has been winning those battles when he's been back. Again, not against the best players in the NFL, but you certainly trust him to do it. I think you take that shot every day of the week. Other points to raise: Walker's penalties, false starts, just absolutely killer. Special teams, awful. Shocking. The decision for Wilson to take it out of the end zone, I mean, Rich Bisaccia had his head in his hands. And this is where I'm conflicted. I'm never one to call for someone's job, particularly sort of a knee-jerk reaction, but it's shown it time and time again that special teams just don't come up with the goods. And Rich Bisaccia is the highest paid special teams coordinator. And I understand his frustration, right? Because I've been in that position as a very small timey coach. You go through all of the coaching, you go through all of the decisions. They're making all the right decisions, seemingly, in practice. And then it comes to game time and they do something. And like he was doubled over with just going, what the hell are we doing here? Is that on Bisaccia? And I know the simplistic answer is yes. And I know some people are screaming at the radio or their iPhone or Android or whatever and saying, Steve, for God's sake, he's ultimately accountable. Yes and no. You drill these lads and they still do the stuff anyway. Does that mean they need to be given a bollocking at the sideline when they come out? Yeah, maybe, but it still doesn't you can't roll back time. Luke Musgrave is showing more ability, I think. There was one diving catch again. Jordan Love probably could have put it more on the money, but you guess under pressure and he was in his own end zone and you're trying to avoid his safety at all costs and you're a little bit more skittish, and I think Musgrave made a great diving catch. And in fairness, I think Jordan Love really was passing at will until the end when Denver knew that it was going to be pass plays to just pin their ear back, got pressure on, and he'd really know where to throw the ball. But look, painfully, I'm going to go through the play-by-play and just show where I believe things went wrong or went right. And we'll get out of Dodge, as I say, sinus infection, bad result, Parsons injured, out for the season. And that's the thing, he's not going to be back for September. And I noticed this discourse sort of saying like, oh, he's a bit of a freak in nature, he might be back. He's going to be on ice. I mean, you look at Christian Watson, he came back and beat all odds and was incredibly mobile. And he was still only back in, 3-4 weeks ago? First defensive stand, they're moving the sticks. You know, Harvey comes in, starts with a 2-yarder, 7-yarder. Nix with a keeper gets first down. Mims gets 5 yards. Sutton gets 4 yards. And it's 3rd and 1. And Parsons comes out and knocks out the fumble. Cooper scoops it up. But I just want to say they had got their first down. They were moving the ball early. And this is what I mean. Parsons was on the field at this stage. We come out with our offense. We're moving the ball, but it's 1st and 15 due to a Walker false start, and unfortunately that seems to be too much to overcome. We do get a long pass to Reed for 13 yards on the series, but you know, you're starting at 1st and 15. There's a Jacobs toss on 3rd and 1, but Wiley gets destroyed, and this is the tail of the tape here, because again, you know, you can, and I've seen criticism of it, and I have written down in a couple of places, don't love the play. There's a couple of times where we've been on like second or I think it's 2nd and long, maybe on 2 or 3. Now again, these bad plays by Matt Lafraud, as the ghouls and goblins like to call it. There's been a couple of 2nd and long situations where he's gone for a run, and it just simply hasn't worked out. It was never on. They blow up the play. But then there's other occasions where the play is actually a good play call, but the assigned blocker just doesn't do his job. Wicks being one of them, and Wiley on this one gets absolutely annihilated. In fact, Wiley gets annihilated so bad that he gets pushed back into Jacobs, and Jacobs gets tumbled over. However, McManus comes out on this, and it's a 53-yarder, absolutely not a gimme, particularly in his form as of late, and he nails it, so that was good. Defense comes out again. Mims, this is what I'm talking about, special teams. It's a 3-and-out, which is great, but Enigbare can't help himself and commits a penalty on the punter, and I just have in my notes why. Like, why? Why would you even bother? Did the punter say something? Did he insult you and your family? Maybe. But just leave him alone. And it didn't help the fact that Mims on special teams came out and ran it back for 36 yards. The second offensive drive for me is just elite quarterback play. You know, that's the one I was talking about. Musgrave with that diving catch. He hits a pass to Dobbs off the back foot, which is just unbelievable. There's a really clever dump off to Fitzpatrick. There's chunk yardage to Golden up the middle. And this is what I will say. Look, Watson's going to be out, probably not out for a majorly long time. I had worried that the injury was to a sternum or to a shoulder or something, but apparently it was to do with his lungs. And he got the all clear after a scan in hospital and went back with the team. So I think there's a couple of times here in this game where Jordan Love went to Matthew Golden and it was just spectacular. One, that he went to him, and I'm okay for these desperation plays. It's defensive pass interference, and they come away with it. And I know that people are calling that call soft, and there was boos at Denver, but that's your job as a Denver fan, to boo that type of stuff. But on this particular drive, brilliant chunk yardage to Matthew Golden up the middle. Again, Jordan Love showing that he's not unable to do those passes up the middle. Then there was a big Dobbs catch near the end zone to the Denver 5, which is scrubbed off by a penalty. Guess who? Rashid Walker, again ineligible downfield. So it brings up a 1st and 15. We eventually get it to a 3rd and 6, which is a good pass to Dobbs, broken up. Probably would have been a touchdown. And again, it's the second drive in a row that have been basically scuppered by Walker penalties. And again, I see some discourse saying, if Walker can't stop doing this nonsense stuff, well then he needs to be sidelined and bring someone else in. But look, and it's terrible, right? It's awful. And I think that he was a large factor in an awful lot of things going wrong for the offense at the most inopportune times. Penalties kills a team and kills your momentum, especially when you're playing stuff like, diving catches to Musgrave and Dobbs off a back foot and Fitzpatrick to get a little bit of yardage when you're under pressure, and then you bang it up the middle to chunk yardage to Golden, and it's all great stuff when you put it on the money, but that's all sort of scrubbed off with a Walker penalty. But just because he's making mistakes doesn't mean that the next guy you're going to shove in there is just automatically going to be better, right? So I think we need to sort of calm ourselves down. So the third defensive stand was the one I was talking about, where they've got false starts. It brings them to 1st and 15. They run for 8. They pass for 15 on a 3rd and 7. Then they bring up a 3rd and 3, and that's where they get their touchdown. And if you let them escape on a 1st and 20 and Bullard goes and starts to spike people into the ground, which gives them their first down, and then they convert 3 third downs, it's just pretty nonsense. And this is what I mean. I mean, the Packers had it all to play for in this game, right up until the very end. They were doing quite well. But when you let them convert 4th downs, when you let them convert 3 third downs, it's just bonkers. I mean, the offense come out again, and Musgrave 7 yards is 3rd and 3. Reed gets 29 yards. It's all great. And then Jacobs goes in for a touchdown, and that's scrubbed off by a Fitz penalty. Then it's 2nd and goal, and guess who comes up again for the penalty? Rashid Walker, right? Now again, it's 3rd down, and that's the touchdown to Josh Jacobs. It's the catch. It's the 2nd of his career. So you could say that all's good that ends well. But look, Reed and Jacobs are pivotal on this, and Walker and Fitz penalties again. They have to go and do an absolute Houdini effort on 3rd and goal to come away with that. The defense comes out again. And this is again just absolute garbage stuff from the defense. It's chunk yardage to Harvey. It's an 8-yard run. It's Sutton for 42 yards. Guess who's covering him? Nixon. Sutton for 4 yards. The Packers get away with a no touchdown call on this, by the way. Valentine also almost gets the interception, but misses Franklin. So that's the one where he runs out. It's almost like a Brian O'Driscoll, if anyone knows Irish rugby play, where he almost intercepts it before it's even caught. But then he can't make that play, and he also can't make the tackle, and Franklin gets down, and then it's a touchdown to Humphreys between 3 Packers defenders, Walker's, Valentine and Bullard, which again is just nonsensical. And this is the sort of tale of the game really for me, is that Nix, he's under pressure, makes a play that you really shouldn't make. It's a pass and tight coverage. It's a conversion. It's a missed tackle. It's a dropped interception. And it just happened all night. It was just nightmarish stuff all night. The end of the half, our offense comes out, and this is where Wilson takes it out of the end zone, just inexplicably. But we get chunk yardage to Watson for 19 yards. Musgrave comes down with 16 yards. We also sort of benefit for getting an extra 15 yards for roughing the passer. It's a tight end screen, and Jacobs runs the ball. And I don't like the play here. It's 2nd and 7, and we run the ball. That's one of the occasions I was talking about where Matt LaFleur, I don't know what he's at there. It's 3rd and 6, Dobbs, first down, slant pass, 17 seconds left. We just simply run out of time in the half, and it's 16-14 at the half. The Packers lead. So again, leading at the half, there's a point in this game where we're only behind by 1. The offense comes out. Perfect start to the second half. 3rd and 4, Golden gets a DPI. Love the call. I really do. I mean, send them long, throw the pass, let them put his hands on him, and then Jacobs goes 40 yards for a touchdown. Defense come out, and it's 3 and out, playing a blinder. And then our offense comes out, and it's an interception. This is where Watson gets injured. And again, there's the sort of hindsight is 20/20 or 40/40. I see some people saying that they don't like the play. I like the play. I think go to Watson. Certain comes down with that unbelievable diving interception, which is just a fantastic play for him and really freak injury for Watson. But that's when you send him downfield. Watson came down with that stuff in the last game. Again, defense come out and it's just absolutely manky. It's, Nix escapes pressure and he hits Humphrey for 22 yards. Nix looks sacked in this. So this is the play that I was talking about where it's never on. And then he escapes again. Looks to be throwing it away and gets 18 yards to Franklin. And then it's a 2nd and 8 and Sutton gets a touchdown of 14 yards. And guess what defender is on the play? Nixon. So Nixon and Valentine for me show up all over the tape as just missing tackles, getting thrown on when they really shouldn't. It's just awful. Second offensive drive. Guess what? False start. Guess who? Rashid Walker. Jacobs gets run stuffed. It's 3rd and 12. It's a long run for 24 yards. Fitz with the block. And again, where there's a couple of times in this game where Fitz gets the ball thrown at him, he acts as his safety valve and he just misses it completely. He drops the ball, has his head elsewhere. You kind of expect it, but he did a good job here. 2nd and 10, the run play is stuffed. Again, don't like the play. It's a 2nd and long again. That's a pass for me. You know, you try to get that chunk yardage, pick up your 6 yards. So again, it's sort of, what's that, 2 drives back to back. I don't like the play from LaFleur. 3rd and 10, sacked. But it's the first time that Love is sacked. And then there's a punt and McDuffie gets done for holding. And that's the second time McDuffie gets done for something. That's the first of both. And this is where I think the game unravels for me. It's the second defensive drive. It's just a disaster. There's 2 McKinney missed interceptions. There's a 3rd and 13 for Ingram for 12 yards. Quarterback sneak on 1st down. Converts to 4th down. 2nd and 10, Franklin, 16 yards. Valentine on the play. And then it's a Harvey 8-yard run, 6-yard run. And then the one that Parsons gets his ACL torn on, McDuffie and Cooper both miss a tackle. Denver get a false start. Doesn't matter because McDuffie almost gets a sack. He's a free runner. And then it eventually goes to Franklin for a touchdown. Valentine on the coverage. So this is nothing to do with Parsons' absence for me. So he tears his ACL. McDuffie is a free runner, almost gets the sack. And then Franklin on the touchdown. Valentine's there. Absolutely zero to do. And I think Van Ness was making a nuisance of himself on that play as well. So offense come out again. Jacobs doing his thing. 8 and 6 yard run. End around to Melton. Again, don't hate the play. And I know there's people moaning about it, but the block by Wicks was manky. And that was the first of 2 absolute calamities because in the very next offensive drive, I believe is Wicks gives up the ball for an interception. So just back-to-back manky plays. But again, on this offensive play, after Wicks is awful, Golden gets the ball, sure hands for 27 yards, sensational catch, and then it's just 3 back-to-back awful plays. Jacobs gets run stuffed, Fitzpatrick bobbles and drops the pass, and then Jacobs with a missed pass, but it was no good anyway. I don't think it should have gone to him. So field goal, 27-26. Packers are only down by 1. 8 defensive drive. It's almost an interception for McDuffie and Cooper. They're looking at each other going, what the hell happened there? McKinney on the coverage, Sutton for 16 yards. Franklin, 9 yards. Guess who's on the play? Nixon. 3rd and 3, deep pass break up by McKinney. Could have been an interception, but you can kind of let that go. And then 4th and 3, Sutton on Valentine for 26 yards. After this, I have Van Ness almost coming down with an interception or fumble recovery, whatever you want to call it. And Igbari gets a penalty again for being offsides, which is half the distance to the goal. And then they go over for the touchdown. But Zane Anderson had him dead to rights. Makes the tackle. Doesn't come down with it. And this is the play I was talking about, our 9th offensive drive, Wicks. Now again, granted the pass was a little bit behind them, but they come down with an interception. So on the night, it comes down to Knicks making the scrambles, making the passes, our defensive secondary just being absolutely hopeless, whether it's Nixon or Valentine or Cooper or double coverage or whatever it is, they come down with it, and we couldn't capitalise on our plays. Again, the defense comes out. Valentine should have had an interception on this play. Van Ness is a free runner, doesn't get the sack. Gary almost gets the sack and Cooper gets the pass breakup. But again, it's a 3 and out, right? Parsons is out and everyone's going to make a big meal of it to say, oh, well, he's out and the defense just fell apart. The defense were already apart before he went out. And on this drive in particular, we should have had an interception with Valentine, had a sack with Van Ness, had a sack with Gary, and then Cooper gets a miraculous pass breakup. Next time our offense come out, we look, pretty hopeless, and that's because they've made us one-dimensional at this stage. Golden comes down with a 10-yard reception on 3rd and 9, but then after that it's hopeless. Love gets sacked twice, and then it's just insult to injury stuff. Like I alluded to earlier in the game, the Broncos are just legging it about the place, trying to do what they can, trying to run out the clock. Insult to injury. Knicks just ducks underneath Colby Wooden and converts more yardage. They go for it in 4th and 1. They don't get it, which is an odd move. And then it's our 11th offensive drive, and it's just manky play. We just can't get that going, and that sort of caps off the game. So if you were to sum it up, is our season over because Micah Parsons is out? No. We'd free runners with Gary and Van Ness, and Nix just ends up making it happen. Throwing into double and triple coverage at times, and it shouldn't have come off. So a couple of those touchdown passes that also shouldn't have been completed if they were in double and triple coverage. When we had a chance to intercept the ball, be it in garbage time, which was never, I mean, that's arguable, right? Because we still could have made something happen. We're only behind 8 points, and you get it, and you get the 2-point conversion. Unlikely stuff happens, but to my reckoning, we had 5 chances of an interception. Couldn't come away with either one of them. And you're just going to get murdered at that point. So unless and until our secondary on defense start coming down with some of these interceptions. I mean, some of this stuff is in and out of hands. You know, some of it's tough and it's a diving grab and it's trying to keep your toes down while you're pulling it in as it goes off the sideline. Granted, right? But these are the type of plays that when they could be made for the Broncos, they made them. And that's what it all comes down to. This is the best team in the AFC. Simulate this being a Super Bowl, and it was absolutely there for the Packers. And I know a couple of you are going to scoff at the thing. There was a couple of bad plays by LaFleur. I think there was a couple of times where we had 2nd and long. It's never a run play, I guess, especially against that front. But the Packers end up going for it, and it doesn't pay off. But when you're committing penalties, and Walker did an awful lot and killed the game, when you're Enagbare and you're going to try sucker punch and mess around with the punter after he makes, it's just boneheaded stuff. When you're taking the ball out of your own end zone, when you shouldn't do, that's at Wilson. When you're not making blocks when you should, that's at Wicks. When you're not catching the ball when you should, that's at Wicks. When you're bobbling the ball and not catching it, that's at Fitzpatrick. You're not making your blocks on end arounds. This is the type of stuff that happens, a calamity of errors. It's not totally on play calling because we put up enough points. This to me comes down to the defense, and this has given other teams the confidence in the next games to drop back and pass. If you can drop back and pass quickly on this team, they've shown you, and this is not only in this game, and I've been saying this the prior podcast, is that you can run on this team if you want to, and you can certainly pass on this team if you want to. And without them having to double cover Micah Parsons, I feel like they might buy an extra second or two, and if that's the case, downfield they go with it, and we don't seem to have the answers. Can we get by without Watson for the next couple of weeks? Yes. Because we have been doing. He's had the ACL injury and he's been working his way back, and he was on a snap count. And now that we have Jaden Reed back, I think Jaden Reed is massively impactful. And I think that the Packers are just going to have to go to Golden. Whatever packages that they have drawn up for Christian Watson, say, well, Golden, that's you now. And trust in it, I think he's proven himself. You know, when he's been open, he's either going to sort of pull in a DPI for you, or he's going to come down with the ball. You're just going to have to go to him. But the problem for me isn't on offense. I think Josh Jacobs is playing out of his skin. And, you know, for what it's worth, Chris Brooks came in and did 1 or 2. I don't know what his snap count was. This problem is not an offensive problem. This problem is not a Matt LaFleur play calling problem. This is a penalty issue when it comes to offense. I mean, look at it. I mean, the amount of opportunities that we left in, because I garnered halftime thoughts, and one of the things that rightly came back is that, you know, we're leading in this game. We're coming up against the best team. They've got a great defense, the defense that are coming down with the most sacks, on pace for the most sacks. And that only really came into play later in the game when we were scrambling around trying to get a pass play going. But we certainly stuck it to them in the run. So this is not an offensive problem. It's not a Matt LaFleur problem. This is a penalty problem for Walker and friends. And it's a defense problem. I think this defense they certainly have the caliber to come down with a couple of sacks even without Parsons. But our defensive secondary is shocking. McKinney included. I'm a big McKinney fan. I think he was outstanding last year. But that was that pressure that we were getting that was just enough so that we weren't getting sacks last year, but we were pressuring, and were coming down with interceptions. You had 5 chances in this game, Lance. Didn't come down with near one of them. So I don't think the season's over because of Parsons. I think the season could potentially be over because they're going to throw on us and our defensive secondary can't come down with it. But look, I'm still optimistic. Shockingly enough. Sinus infection and all. I'm still optimistic that, you know, a couple of things go the Packers' way. A couple of less penalties on offense where we put up a bit more of a score. Go for touchdowns instead of field goals. And that just puts this out of reach. I think Jordan Love is looking super sharp. And I think Jaden Reed is looking fantastic. And I think Luke Musgrave is coming into his own. I think a couple of those passes last night that Bo Nix made when he shouldn't have made, we come down with the interception. They're game changers. It's going to be squeaky bum time for the rest of this season. And we're coming up against the Bears. Which is going to be tough. But it's still in our hands, believe it or not. I think if we just win out in the division, I think we still have a shot. Now, how far will we go in the playoffs? Not very far if this is our defensive secondary, but stranger things can happen. But anyway, I don't think it's all lost. The question is our season over? My answer is no. But yes, but not because of Parsons. It's up to us still. Stick in there, lads. Stick in there. Maybe turn off social media. You know what I mean? Just turn it off for a while. And keep the faith. So I'll be back for quick snappage in the next game. All is not lost. That's what I will say. But I do see the podcast numbers dip when we come away with a loss like this. But if you want my 2 cents, there it is. Anyway, I've been at Steady the NFL. You've been the best bloody audience ever. We are Packers fans. You know, and all of that dramatic stuff till we're dead and cold and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, back for quick snaps. Still all to play for. Thanks for listening. And go back, go.